I don't know, man, but I know tonight is his night. So just as the brother's about to start now, please let us know where you're coming from, where you're listening from, especially if you're in the Caribbean, if you're in Canada, the USA, if you're in the UK. Just let us know. We want to give you a big shout. We got London in the house, Walthamstow. We got Canada. We got Trinidad. We got Barbados. We got Slough. We got Stratford. We got Luton. We got Croydon. We got Leeds. We got Lewisham. We got Dominica, Milton Keynes. We got Toronto. We got Surrey. We got Birmingham. We got St. Lucia. Go on. We got Pinner. We got, oh gosh, Harrow, Washington, D.C., Manchester, Stepney Green, Northampton, Nottingham, Tanzania. I'll say Tanzania, forgive me. Belize, Reverend, don't laugh at me, big man. We got Belize, we got Uganda, we got Atlanta, Georgia, we got Enfield, we got Yard, man, Brixton, Wolverhampton, North Wheezy. Yeah, my G's in North Wheezy, Leicester, Wembley, Drayton, Manchester. Okay, let me stop there. Islington, Lord gosh. Reverend, we bow to you, my king. And you know what, soldier? Talk to us, man. How you been?
I'm phenomenal, brother. I can't wait to present to the community. I just absolutely love and adore my family over the pond, on the other side of the pond, as you say. And we're holding it down here, my Baba. You are doing such great work. I just absolutely honor you and big you up. What you do for the community is absolutely amazing. And to be able to do it with such consistency and such veracity is just absolutely incredible. So I just want to give you a shout out on that, brother. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
We've got Sister Josephine Browns that says, we love you, Reverend Shock. Now, Reverend,
I love you too.
This is why I'm getting vexed now, brother. How come you just come on my platform? Everyone loves it. All the women say that they love. No one says that to me no more, you know. But you just shine your pretty teeth, your little designer beard, and all the women say that they love you, man. Sure. My goodness.
Oh my gosh. Well, cataracts and glaucoma is very real in the family. And so I don't know if these are blind people that can't see. I don't know what the heck y'all looking at because I ain't that good looking. But anyway, I appreciate all the love that y'all giving me.
I love that. Reverend, I'm not going to stop you any further, big brother. Can I just say before you start, sir?
Yes,
brothers
sir.
and sisters, if you want to ask any questions based on Reverend Shock's presentation, please, Sister Jurita, are you there, Sister Jurita? Are you there, Sister Jurita?
I am.
All right. Sister Jurita is doing the Q&A box. So, brothers and sisters, because brother is going to drop some...
Hey, Sister Jurita.
...tonight.
Hey, sir. How are you?
Fantastic. Now, Baba, I want to make sure that I'm able to share my screen. I'm in a keynote this time, and I wanted to. Last time I was in PowerPoint, and I just had to go through the slide in the actual interface. Let's see if we can get this to work.
Whilst you're doing that, I'll just tell everyone you can get yourself ready, my big brother.
Okay. Sounds good.
Whilst brothers doing that, brothers and sisters, Sister Jurita is in charge of the questions and the comments. So, sister, please look out for the comments. Yeah, individual comments as well as the questions. Okay. Big up Sister Clarion from Jamaica, Kingston, one of my warrior queens out there. So brothers and sisters, if you've got questions, please put it in the Q&A box. Yeah, put it in the Q&A box. And Sister Jurita, throughout the presentation, she's got the license to stop the brother and ask intermediate questions at any time she wants to. Yeah. And if there's comments, Jurita, please look at the comments and make note of certain comments that you may want to highlight that you think that it'd be good for us all to see. Okay. So, Reverend, I think everything's working on your side, I believe.
I'm not sure. Are you able to see my full screen?
That's full screen, brother. That looks good.
Oh, you can see it.
It's a full screen for me. Yeah.
Okay, great. So now let me move my mouse here to minimize you guys. Hold on. Okay, we're going to start out with our affirmation of power, prosperity, and protection, as we always do when we come onto the platform, and that is, I am one with first frequency. I am one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people, and I am one with the only one. Ashe. And so it is. So for those of you who know me, you know that I dedicate all of my programs to, and my entire ministry to, three goddesses. And that is, of course, my spiritual mother, Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, who says, "You are the thinker who thinks the thought that makes the thing." And Reverend Dr. Helen Carey, and Nana Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Now, this presentation is brought to you by, I released what we call, I guess the kids will call an EP, that's available on all of the streaming platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Napster, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Nothing is wrong with Black people. Something happened to Black people. It's 7 sessions that I did where I talk about the deep-seated understanding of trauma. I presented some of this content to you when I first came to the UK via Andrew Muhammad. And so you can go and just download that, stream that, and take a look at it, or take a listen to it and begin to understand nothing's wrong with you. Here's what happened to you. So what is First Frequency of Oneness? Our ministry, we help create a spiritual, psychological, and emotional barrier to the hidden signal of racial battle fatigue and racial domestic terror and violence. We remove the African and the African American from the effects of their false racial identities, which we call third and fourth frequency. We're going to be talking about that momentarily. We help the African and the African American overcome their trauma bonding, capture bonding, and Stockholm syndrome to whiteness. And we did an amazing platform and conversation on that the last time I was with you. We are a culturally specific teaching ministry. We're exclusively for Africans and African Americans. We specialize in healing and removing the ancestral, historical, and incarnate trauma within Africans and African Americans. We help reveal the natural and original first frequency signal or vibration. And we're based on science, not self-esteem. So we don't necessarily care how you feel. We care how you live and how you move through your life. This is not a hyperbole. This is a science-based teaching ministry and process that we do. For those of you who've never heard of me before, I'm known as the Metaphysical Morpheus. Some of you have called me, know my nickname that Lord Jamar gave me, Shoctimus Prime. I saw somebody put that out there in the chat. Love you too. You can go to metaphysicalmorpheus.com to learn more. But I have a master's degree in metaphysical science and philosophy, currently working on my doctorate in the same field. You can go to metaphysicalmorpheus.com, and there's a 3-part series where you can kind of get some background story and history on how I came to be, what I went through in my life to become who I am today. As I use the quote by Les Brown, "In order to acquire something that you've never had, you must become someone that you've never been." SHOCK stands for Seeking Higher Omnipotent Conscious or Cosmic Knowledge. I'm the founding minister of First Frequency of Oneness, Science, Manifestation, and Prosperity. And I'm also the founder of the Shock Metaphysics Virtual Comedic Wisdom School. And I'm the host of the Philippe Matthews Show. That's many of you know me, and that's what Andrew was speaking of earlier when he was on last week or the week before that with us, talking about the Meghan Markle situation. I've authored over 19 books. I have this lecture is based on my master's thesis, Can Using Metaphysics, Meditation, and Affirmations Daily Heal the Trauma of Generational Poverty in African Americans? And then, of course, Baba Kaba, who just released his latest book, Shabaka Stone, about 3 days ago. Of course, Spirituality Before Religion. He refers to me as the Marcus Garvey of our time. And Mark Victor Hansen, best-selling author in history, with Chicken Soup for the Soul, refers to me as the Oprah of the internet. All right, so let's get into it, family. First things first, there are no white people. So let's just get it in our heads and get it in our minds, get it in our hearts, that historian Barbara Fields describes the fictitious nature of race. She says, anyone who continues to believe in race as a physical attribute of individuals might as well also believe that Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy are real, and that the earth stands still while the sun moves. Now, when we understand this, there's an invention of white people. I talk about this all the time. Some of you already know this history, but for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, the false race of white people was invented as a matter of law in the United States between 1664 and 1681 in response to Bacon's rebellion. This false racial construct placed the African at the bottom of American society and stripped us of all of our rights. There is no biological validity to the false concept of race. White people or whiteness is not biological. It is ideological, having a detrimental intergenerational neurobiological effect on all African people in the diaspora. Now, there's a great book by Nancy Eisenberg called White Trash. Big read, about 400 so pages, but it's the history of whiteness and white trash and where it comes from and the mindset and the ideology and how they move. And as you have been treated, as you have seen how these people act, this group, you will begin to see the data as I begin to present this to you. She says that the history starts in the 1500s. It derives from British colonial policies dedicated to resettling the poor, decisions that conditioned American notions of class and left a permanent imprint. There's an old joke that says anything that's wrong with America and the racism in America, always blame the British. So I'm gonna blame the white British, but not and the European British, but not my brothers and sisters in the diaspora. She says, first known as waste people and later white trash, marginalized Americans were stigmatized for their inability to be productive, to own property, or to produce healthy and upwardly mobile children. The sense of uplift on which the American dream is predicated. Now, if you understand what happened, this is what happened to us. They reversed it and flipped the script and made us the victims of this, when in actuality, if you really want to keep it real, they are the original niggers. They are the original waste people, the original levels of trash. Africans have nothing to do with this ideology. Now, she says, well into the 20th century, expulsion and even sterilization sounded rational to those who wished to reduce the burden of loser people on the larger economy. Now, this is great. This is American history, but also British history. The mid 19th century, when poor rural whites were categorized as somehow less than white. Remember, that's a false racial construct that was created, but there within that exclusion from the 1%, they excluded their own European brethren and called them waste people. Their yellowish skin and diseased and decrepit children, marking them as a strange breed apart. The words waste and trash are crucial to any understanding of this powerful and enduring vocabulary. Throughout its history, the United States has always had a class system. It is not only directed by the top 1% and supported by the contented middle class. We can no longer ignore the stagnant, expendable bottom layers of society in explaining the national identity. White trash were dangerous outliers in effort to rebuild the Union during Reconstruction. And in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, when the eugenics movement flourished, they were the class of degenerates targeted for sterilization. So let's just be with that for a moment. We understand eugenics is European made, American made, and they were just like the concept of Hitler. They were looked upon to be terminated and to be rid of. This is what they do. But I needed you to have a taste of this history and understanding of this history, so that as we move through this work, you have language, context, and framework to be able to understand nothing's wrong with you. Something happened to you.
Brother Reverend,
yes, sir.
Can I just say, within 10, 15 minutes, you have destroyed everything we've been taught over the last... No, brother, don't laugh. Do you understand?
Are you serious? Come on, man.
Brothers, you understand what I'm trying to say tonight, brother? Brother, are you listening, brother? He has, within 10 to 15 minutes, absolutely rerouted every single concept Carry on, big brother. Carry on.
I love, hey man, I love what I do, and I love you, and I love your enthusiasm. I got to find a way to like get some DNA samples so I can just have you up on my dresser when I wake up in the morning. You know what I'm saying? Love me some Andrew Muhammad, family. So Dr. Jacqueline Badalore, all of you who know of her work from my show, she wrote a great piece of work, Birth of a White Nation. Her book was part of my thesis, review of literature and part of my thesis. Irish Catholics in the US were portrayed as anti-American, not full citizens, and as white Negroes. Understand, these are the original Negroes. These are the original niggers.
Come on.
It is not us. It is not us.
Teach.
Understand this, family. This is the history now.
Teach.
So I want you to understand, whenever they call you the N-word, they are saying that to themselves. Baldwin asked the question, why do you need a nigger in the first place? Because if they don't have a nigger, they realize they are the nigger. And this is what they have done to themselves and, of course, subsequently around the world. Let's keep moving. So today we're going to talk about race technologies. And race technology is the sinister science behind scientific racism and where it comes from. I was so honored and privileged to be exposed to this information. Most people don't know it and probably have never heard it. This is my first time presenting it on a national, international platform. So this is an exclusive to you all, to the Hidden Truth platform, as we talk about and break down this concept of race technologies. Thomas Bialosi is head professor of ethnic studies at Berkeley, California. And it's an amazing piece of work. When you get into these doctoral levels, you got to read these books are like hundreds of dollars and 400 and 500 pages. It's absolutely insane. But if you're seriously serious and you got to teach the community, this is what the sacrifice that you have to make. And so it's called A Companion to Anthropology of Politics. And I also did a show with Michael Kilman and Dr. Jacqueline Badalore on the tools and technologies of racial control. And there's 4 of them: stating, mixing, classifying, and spacing. We're going to go into each of these in depth so you can get an understanding, again, the framework and the technology, the ideology that is running on an automated platform. You will be able to see in this data that I'm going to share with you, nothing's wrong with you. This is what's happening to you and happening to us simultaneously. So we're going to start out with stating.
Can I just say it before you go there, big brother?
Sure, Baba.
Yeah, Lady Adele, you asked a question. I know when you ask a question, Lady Adele, it has a deep meaning. Lady Adele, what did you ask the brother?
I asked the brother, that is the reason that the word nigger has been globally banned. Is it more about us finding out the truth behind that word and turning it back on them?
When you say, well, you can't take a negative and turn that into, like we use the N-word here and we use it in music and what have you, and we try to use it as a term of endearment, but it's a term of terror. What's happening, Goddess Adele, is they are, it's almost like a antivirus program like Norton or McAfee or something like that, that looks and searches for the Trojan worm in your computer, and the worm starts to move and go to different parts of the computer, of the hardware, of the software, and then all of a sudden it gets caught and it can't run anymore. And what you're seeing right now is European society, all the lies, all of the ideology, all of the terrorism is now coming back on them. And so now they're in a state of denial, and they're trying to maneuver and move this around where they are not held responsible and culpable. But there is no white person, whether that's a 3-year-old or 8-year-old to an 80-year-old, that is not complicit in all of this process that we are living currently and globally. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's basically where I'm coming from. Your thoughts? Did I answer your question, Goddess?
I think you did partially. I was just thinking, because when I think about the banning of that word, particularly in this country, I'm not quite sure that if it wasn't a black uprising, in my opinion, that banned the word, but it was more of a white European reason for banning that word.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
So
interesting.
that's why I was thinking, is it because if they thought we could come to the truth of this word like we have tonight, then that word would be thrown back at them. Whereas at the moment, we think it's all about us and our color. But whereas
Yes.
you just told us your origins is not with black people, it is with white people or white trash, so to speak. So
That's right.
is that why the word was chosen to be banned? Because we didn't ban it?
That is excellent. I didn't know that. That would probably be right, because one of the things that's happening here in the States is we're going through this concept of being challenged with our First Amendment. And so what they're doing, if you notice, a lot of whites and Europeans are saying, well, you're racist, or that's a racist term, or you're being racist against me. And what they're trying to do is they're going to start targeting people like myself, people with YouTube channels and things of sort. Certain conversations will be flagged as racist, so that they then become the victim. See, this is one of the things that they do, and this is part of the technology, is that they reverse everything, flip the script, reverse projection, and dynamically project that back onto whatever the group is that they need to have, so that they can feel superior, because they are ethnically an inferior people. And so as a result, they just whatever we do and say to protect ourselves, now they're doing it. And then you're also seeing it with Asians. Asians are now saying, hey, we're being discriminated against. This is racist. And it's like, well, where were all of the Asian community when Sandra Bland was dying, when Ahmaud Arbery was being shot to death, when George Floyd was being killed? Where were you? But now you want our help, want our sympathy. And what I'm trying to tell the family is that no, I want the African and the African American community at large to act like they're on a plane, and when the flight attendant says, before you help anybody else, I want you to use your oxygen mask first. And so it's time for us to be self-full and selfish, so we can be selfless. As a result, we need to protect our own first. We need to get this education and information to our people first, and we need to help Africans and African Americans first. And then if there's something left over, we'll give it to them. All right, let's talk about stating. Now, stating in the notes of State of Virginia, 1787, Thomas Jefferson stated, the physical and moral character of African Americans. And mind you, this statement was 100 years before he was even born. Whiteness and white people were invented as a matter of law. So he was birthed into this concept of white privilege. He was birthed into being able to own and have chattel slavery as an absolute norm in his life. So when we understand that this concept in metaphysics we call cause and effect, there was always a call. Always look for the first causation. Always look for the reason. What is the primary reason? What is the primary research? Don't try to heal an effect with an effect. Racism is not a cause. Racism is merely an effect of a cause of this psychopathic, sociopathic European who came to America and began implementing these crazy ideological terroristic laws. So Jefferson says they secrete more by the glands of the skin, which gives them a very strong and disagreeable odor. They are more ardent after they're female, but love seems with them to be more an eager desire than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. Their griefs are transient. In general, their existence appears to participate more of sensation than reflection. To this must be ascribed their disposition to sleep when abstracted from their diversions and unemployed in labor. Comparing them by their faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they are equal. They are equal to whites, in reason much inferior, as I think one could scarcely be found capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that in imagination, they are a dull, tasteless, and anomalous. I advance it, therefore, that blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to the whites in the endowments both of body and mind. Now, this is what happens when you are born into an ideological, terroristic way of thinking. You need to look at whites. We need to look at whites and Europeans no differently than we look at ISIS or Arab terrorism, whatever that concept is, that ideology. This whiteness is an ideology, and it comes from a psychopathic and sociopathic people. And so as a result, this makes sense to them. This was the president. This makes sense to them.
Sorry, Reverend, I'm going to have to just butt in here. I'm so sorry, but
sure.
I think you've really shocked some people with some of those comments, and I just wanted to jump in and give you some of the feedback that you've had so far, and just a couple of questions really just before they go amiss with everything else that you've been giving. Sure. So we've had Dennis say knowledge is power. We've had Michael come and say that this information is so deep. Is it Njamili? Oh my gosh, she's going to kill me for saying her name wrong. Njamili, she said, brilliant presentation so far. And Kemet said, black people didn't know that the word nigger was used on white people for sure. And if we did,
wow, I didn't. Okay, excellent.
You know, we probably would do something better with it. You know, feel better about ourselves. Tina says it's jealousy. Bonnie has said this is definitely some root knowledge. But in terms of some of the questions that's popped up that I think I would want to pass at you at this point. One question was, so the word nigger has no relation to the river Niger. And the second question is, if race is a social construct, what was the objective of human zoos and scientist racism as a whole?
Well, actually, I'm going to be addressing that in race technologies.
Hey, okay.
That's a great question because it will answer that. That's thank you so much for those questions and comments as we continue to move forward. Looking at stating, even though some blacks had received liberal educations and other exposure to civilization, Jefferson says, never could I find a black had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration. Never seen even an elementary trait of painting or sculpture. Jefferson concluded, I advance it, therefore, that blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to whites in their endowments in both mind and body. Now, when we understand what this means, when we start to dig into the causation of this mindset, if you are born psychopathic, sociopathic to a sociopathic, psychopathic community, then quite naturally you're going to be psychopathic and sociopathic, but it's going to be logical to you, right? When we look at someone like Donald Trump and we listen to some of these people, it seems logical to them. When we listen to Piers Morgan, when we listen to what the British say, and it seems logical to them. Why? It's because they're birthed into it. It's epigenetic to them. So you can't make sense of it. And you can't make them see the sense in it. That's our mistake, is that we're, yelling and screaming, saying, hey, you're going into a burning building, and let them go into the burning building. You cannot save this psychopathic breed of people. Now, when we talk about stating and the concept of negrophobia, Franz Fanon says that summarize this white insistence on the inescapably uncivilized otherness of the black person by starkly enunciating the terms by which the black person is hailed in racist society: dirty nigger, or simply look, a Negro. Now, mind you, this is what was used on them when they came here. Remember when I was on, I forgot when I was on a few months ago, and I shared the story about how there was not enough women for the planters and for the plantation owners. And so what they did was they actually shipped women from your neck of the woods, from Britain, to America. And here at that time during the in Virginia and the colonies, they did not, they were slaves and indentured servants, but it was, everybody was equal in the sense that there was Europeans working with Africans and so on and so forth. Everybody was equal on the quote unquote plantation, and there was no thing of white people or no class issues or anything like that. Well, it's class, but not racial class. Well, when all of these women that came over saw all of that were supposed to be for the planters, saw these beautiful Adonis African kings and gods, they got jungle fever and ended up marrying them. And this was the beginning of another level of that trigger of that psychopathic, sociopathic behavior that triggered after Bacon's Rebellion. And they developed this divide and conquer strategy. So Thomas Belosi says, what is remarkable is how little the thrust of white race stating about blacks have changed since Jefferson's day. While he spoke of racial inferiority, contemporary scholars, the media, and the white imagination loquaciously expound on the black culture of poverty, the black family as a tangle of pathology, the black underclass characterized by skyrocketing rates of crime and illegitimate births, and all the Negrophobic images that come seemingly natural to the white mind. This is what they did to each other. We are born gods and goddesses. We have been made into Negroes and niggas. So there is no such thing as a third and fourth frequency Negro or nigga. You are not that. You're not a bitch. You're not a hoe. You're not a thug, thought, baby mama, baby daddy. All of that is white, male, patriarchy made. Your original self at birth, even before birth, is that of an African god and goddess, because the creator only creates the best creations. Nothing's wrong with you. Something happened to you, happened to us. And that was when this group of Africans went into the Caucasus region over 300 years, depigmented themselves. As a result, they became psychopathic and sociopathic. They were exposed to temperatures at the last 5,000 years of the Ice Age of temperatures below 200 to 400 below zero. When that happens, great study was done. You no longer are able to access God. You're no longer able to access ascension. You're no longer able to think of your thinking. You're seriously at that point in survival mode. At that point, even though they had been depigmented, they began to erode psychologically and became psychopathic because they had no food and they had to fight for all the resources. This moves into Dr. Edwin Nichols' work on axiology and his work called The Philosophical Aspects of Cultural Differences, where he talks about how the European had sometimes only 3 months to grow a crop. As a result, in the Ice Age, that is death if you get it wrong. And this is where cannibalism comes in, because when they missed that crop, when they missed that window to grow a crop, they had to eat their young and eat their elderly. And they became barbaric. Hence the term civilization and barbarism by Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, and understanding the northern and southern cradle concept and what's known as the Ice Age theory. Belosi says welfare creams, gangsters, drug dealers, and even genetic inferiority. No wonder the blacks are at the bottom. Now think about genetic inferiority. We know that they are genetically recessive due to the work of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. But again, here's what I need the family to do. Every single thing, negative, minimizing, marginalizing that they say about us, state about us, they're saying about themselves, because they are that. So, you know, like when you were a kid and, you know, if you're on the playground with your friends or peers, might not be your friends, but your peers, you know how you have some insecurities, maybe low self-esteem, low self-value and worth. And so what you do is you end up becoming a bully so that you can feel good about yourself, and you impose that on others by stating, so so and so is dirty, so and so smells. This is what they understood that they had to do in order to survive. So now we're going to go into, after we go into stating, now we're going to go into technology number 2, mixing. Mixing is the next one. Now, when we talk about mixing, oh, look at the lovely couple up at the top. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. But anyway, the danger, if ex-slaves remained as free men in Virginia, was that mixture might result in staining the blood of whites. Remember when they shipped all of these women from the UK, from Britain to America, and they didn't go with the planters for what they were originally shipped over here for. They ended up catching jungle fever and say, I love this black Adonis. And as a result, that was another psychological factor that these European men were saying, well, what's wrong with us? Because one of the things about the Dark Ages, reason that Game of Thrones and shows like that are #1 in the world, is because it smacks of their time when they mattered, when they existed. That was their beginning. Our beginnings began with the Creator in Africa. Their beginnings began in the Dark Ages after coming out of the caves. And so they perfected torture, chattel slavery on their own women and on their own people first. And this is where we get very confused, because we think some white women or European women we just had this conversation last night. Is there any such thing as a good white person? Because of what white and whiteness was created and invented to do, to divide and conquer humanity and protect the 1%, there is no such thing as a good white person. It's an ideology that is germane or analogous to terrorism. So whiteness is no different than like I said, like ISIS, and being in that mindset of terrorism. You can't make white right. So this is understanding that in order for them to survive, they had to have a technology and understanding that mixing would also speak to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's work of genetic annihilation. And so genetic annihilation is what Dr. Welsing talked about on the Phil Donahue show back, I think it's 75 or so. You can go on YouTube and watch it, where she was on, I think, during Martin Luther King's birthday. I don't know if it was the day or the week, but she says, Dr. King talks about loving everyone. Well, if we loved everyone, white people would literally vanish off the face of the planet within 1 generation, because they're genetically recessive. But they put it on us that we are genetically inferior. And that is not the case. We are the original DNA of God. We are the original DNA of the Creator, because the Creator created us. When the Creator, there's the original Trinity that all religions comes from, is the Nun, Ptah, and Atum. And so the waters of Nun, the primordial waters, is, if you will, the unified field of unlimited potentiality, the quantum field, the supreme being, the all in all, the universe, whatever term you want to ascribe to this primordial waters. When it began to say that I want to manifest and see myself multiplied within and throughout myself, Ptah, the conversion began. The Kepra began. As a result, then Atum came in and named and labeled and produced everything. That's the original Trinity, spiritual version of the Trinity, from where everything comes from. So imagine that you have a group of people who are created by the Creator. Think about that. The DNA is what you are, but deity is who you are. We are gods and goddesses having this enslaved, mentally enslaved, physically enslaved situation and experience. But if you don't know that, if you don't know your first frequency, if you don't know you're born a god or a goddess, you are going to take on the false identity of calling and referring to yourself as a bitch or a hoe. You're going to refer and call yourself a nigga or a negro. You're going to do that to other people who are in your space, who look like you or your peers. You are going to think that that is the way and that is who you are, and that has nothing to do with you. That is so far from the truth of who you are, which is why I'm so honored to be able to do the work that I do, to be able to enlighten people on here's what happened to you, nothing's wrong with you. And some people can't even handle that level of truth because it's sometimes so overwhelming. If you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and you're figuring this out for the first time, it can put you, it can put you in a hospital and have an identity crisis, which we talked about in the last program. So let's review what's called anti-miscegenation as we talk about this, the second technology of mixing. Anti-miscegenation laws or miscegenation laws are the laws that enforce racial segregation at the level of marriage and intimate relationships by criminalizing interracial marriage and sometimes also sex between members of different races. So this, and by the way, that's the law. You can go to the burgessarchives.org. There's volumes of the original Virginia laws. So as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, this is a science-based ministry. And so I'm not coming to you with my opinion on anything. I have opinions, but it might not matter. But I come with the science and law. So these are the laws, they're written. This is why you look at the first cause. Where did it come from? What were the laws of Virginia? What caused and created white people? We can't just act like this is normal. It's not normal. It's not natural. What happened to us? Why are we in the situation that we're in? So I just want to go back and backtrack on that. So these laws, as I talked about the last time I was here, there's 3 of them there's a cluster of laws, but 3 of them brought us to this conversation today.
Sir,
and you can look at the imagery and see how they view us. Yes.
Is this a good time to cut in? Sorry,
Sure, come on.
catch you sort of midway. I don't want to sort of stop you as you are mid-flow, but just a couple more comments to give you and a couple of questions that I think will be good. So we've got a really good comment from Sonia, who says that they've spent a lot of time has been spent portraying another race as inferior with desperation. I thought that was quite a good way of trying to put it. Tina needs to behave a little bit. She asked where Jefferson's lips were in that picture. And behave, Tina, behave. And Darren said, you're going in. And Zenrina, I think it is, she said, no. When you said no black people, no white people even are okay. She said, oh no, I thought my neighbor was okay. So sorry about so I thought that was funny.
Let me make a comment on that.
Sure.
Good. So nice people, you can be white and be nice. You can be white and be kind, but there's a terror that's inside of you, and depending upon the right trigger, your whiteness is going to come out, and you're going to center into that whiteness, and you're going to harm somebody of color. You're going to harm somebody that you or the whiteness has labeled as the other. It's inevitable, and we've seen that happen again and again. Look at Sharon Osbourne. We never thought that Sharon would put herself in that position, but she did. Look at Piers Morgan. They always tell on themselves, and whiteness always centers. And so as a result, there's no such thing as a good white person. But these are people who are acting out psychopathically, sociopathically from a false ideology. They don't know that they're not white. They don't know that it's not biological. They think that they are literally real and that they exist. And in order to do that, they have to defend it. And this is why they feel they want to be, now this is the crazy thing, Goddess Adele, they want to be us. They want to be African. They want to come home. They want to go back to the primordial waters of the Nun. They want to go back to God. They want to go back to Africa, to the Creator. But because of what happened to them, they can't access that highest frequency. They can't access what you and I naturally and normally access on a daily basis. And that makes them angry. That makes them enraged. That makes them fragile. And when we look at that science that I showed last time I was here, when white privilege is challenged, or whiteness is challenged, it creates white privilege. When that challenge is challenged, it creates white fragility. When fragility is challenged, it creates white rage. And so you'll see the levels and layers of behavior from a Piers Morgan to a Sharon Osbourne to any of the Europeans of how they start to, in their minds, defend their integrity to be white is psychologically insane, because you're basically saying, I want to be a terrorist for all of the other people. I am white, I am superior, and I'm biological, and that is the falsehood. That's the lie. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's almost innate, that kind of, it's an inbuilt thing that they're not even
absolutely
realizing at this stage. That's deep. Two questions, and I'll let you get on. The first is, Jocelyn has asked, who started this divide? You obviously speak about a racial divide. Who started it? Can we pinpoint that to one person? And Kimani's asked, why are mixed race people called black? And is that more white tricks?
Well, actually, I'm gonna get into that, because that's exactly why I wanted to do this presentation, to talk about that one, the 3-drop rule, that whole thing about biracial and mixed people. That's coming up. The first question was the origins of where white people came from.
Yes.
The burgessarchives.org, there's a volume of laws there. It's free. You can go in, and I think you can download all of the PDFs of all of these books. But in there was, now the only thing you have to do is, back then, you have to translate F into S, because I don't think the S was created at the time. It was an F with a line going across it, which stands for S. But in those, this was the laws between 1664, 1681, when and how and why white people were invented as a matter of law in America. That became a distinction separate from the British, because there is no history book where there were generals and stories about white people. It was always European or geographically based people, Britain and what have you. So white is an American-made concept. It's a divide and conquer strategy based upon Bacon's rebellion, when Nathaniel Bacon realized and got a group of everyone together and said, hey, this is not fair. We're not going to make enough money to be able to feed our families. And so he started attacking with Native Americans, with Africans, with indentured servants and slaves. They all got together and started attacking the 1% and stealing their homes, stealing their merchandise, stealing their money, and attacking them and killing them in some instances. You saw that with the insurrection of the state capitol here in America, but this was the first. And they said, as a result, America almost did not happen. The king said, look, we're going to give you some troops and we're going to help you out. This war went through, or this rebellion went 2.5 years. But as a result, they ended up winning and said, wait a minute, before you pull the plug, king, we're going to create a divide and conquer strategy. And that is what's known as the anti-miscegenation laws and the invention of white people. And that was in 1681. They already started noodling the idea around the 1600s, 1664, but it really became a law, and it became something that was mandatory when white people were invented. Now, in that invention, 3 things happened. A person of African descent could no longer vote or run for office. Number 2, a person of African descent could not own guns or gunpowder, so they couldn't protect. So the African man became an African boy, and as a result, could not protect or defend his queen or his children. And so we can look at that epigenetically and intergenerationally, why Black men are not able to have economics, not able to support their families, have many women, many baby mamas, quote unquote, and so on and so forth, because we became boys, whereas that law allowed this new false designation of white men to have access to our women and all women. We're going to get into that as well. And then thirdly, a person of African descent could not take any legal action against this new false racial construct called white. So you have no rights. So we see that now with Sandra Bland and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and so on and so forth. We see the same psychopathic ideology today, but it comes from these laws that were produced that created this false racial construct of white. So when we talk about anti-miscegenation law, it made it illegal for white people to marry various people seen as not white. It is a body of law that is an important feature of colonial North America and U.S. history. These laws have significantly shaped people within the United States today, how we appear and how we relate, having lasted more than 300 years before found unconstitutional in '67 with Loving versus Virginia. Now, let's get back to our no-lipped, whoever it was says what happened to his lips. Let's get back to Jefferson. I'm so bad. He says, beyond the borders of Virginia, the danger, if ex-slaves remained as free men in Virginia, was that mixture might result in staining the blood of whites. This was in 1787 that he said this. And there was even more insidious likelihood of this staining than might at first be thought. Since their black skin and African hair and body form made them less beautiful than whites. This is Jefferson now. Black men, watch this, black men, this is his words, President of the United States. Black men came to prefer white women over the females of their own kind, just as the orangutan prefers the black woman over those of his own species. Do you see the sickness? Do you see the psychopathy? Now imagine you're being born into something and you don't know who you are. Now, this ideology is going to define who you are. You're going to be a Negro, a good go-along Negro, or you're going to be a nothing-ass nigger. Regardless, you're going to go after the snowflake. You're going to look at that as the standard of beauty, not as your own goddess from your own community, from your own people, because you have been separated from your original bloodline. As a result of that, that staining and mixing is what has happened. And they saw it as a term of genetic annihilation. But for us, it manifests as not knowing who we are and not honoring and being afraid of anything and everything Africa. Now, the laws against black-white miscegenation and intermarriage appeared very early in U.S. history. In an effort to prevent abominable mixture and spurious issue, Virginia enacted a law in 1691, that's 10 years after, about 20 years after, 20 so years after white people were invented, which made it a crime for any English or other white man or woman to intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman. Virginia singled out miscegenation outside of marriage as a crime distinct from mere fornication in 1662. So get this, whatever Jefferson's erudite expositions of the dangers of mixing and staining, he was not able to keep himself from mixing while his own slave, Sally Hemings, and thus staining his own children. Indeed, since the offspring of white men and black slaves, contrary to the precedent of English common law, took the status of the mother and not the father in the United States, the economizing slave owner actually had a financial incentive to impregnate his slaves. I know some of y'all are seeing this for the first time and saying, damn, this is absolutely insane, because that's how it was for me when I first found out. Again, shock. I had to go into shock. Seeking higher omnipotent, conscious, cosmic knowledge is a process that I developed, a framework of seeking that causal effect knowledge and wisdom to explain what happened to us, because I know nothing is wrong with us. Moving on, mixing in Virginia, for example, rape was originally merely aggravated assault. Rape was aggravated assault, a misdemeanor for either black or white perpetrators. But by 1823, attempted rape of a white woman by a black was punishable by death. Now you're beginning to see how all of this is adding up. The Scottsboro Boys were 9 African-American teenagers, 12 to 19 years of age, accused in Alabama in 1931 of raping a white woman. The landmark set of legal cases from this incident dealt with racism and the right to a fair trial. The cases included a lynch mob before the suspects had been indicted, all white juries, rushed trials, and disruptive mobs. It is commonly cited as an example of a miscarriage of justice in the United States legal system. So now you're beginning to see how all of this starts to, even though it's not sensible, it makes sense. So I want that to be clear. You can't make sense of something that's insensible. This is insane. This is insanity. But we're dealing with and peering into the ideas, the mindset of a psychopathic, sociopathic group of people called Europeans. And this is how, and then that split, here was another psychopathic split. When white people were invented, then the European became white. And so now the Europeans think that they are white, and white is just an ideology, a false racial construct. And so you have gone even further down the rabbit hole of psychosis. And so this is very difficult for some of us to hear for the first time, because we don't want to really wake up and look at our blue-eyed, green-eyed neighbors, or God forbid, family members, and know that they come from a psychopathic class and process. That's hard pill to swallow. Mixing, while race-specific provisions were removed from rape statutes after the Civil War, unlicensed terror against Black men suspected of rape or attempted rape of whites was prevalent in the form of lynching. One estimate close to 3,000 lynchings between 1890 and 1950. 3,000. Understand that it did not stop at unlicensed terror against Black men. Legal lynching, as it's called, involved the prosecution, conviction, and sentencing with a vengeance of Black men charged with raping white women. Remember that movie that was shown in the White House, Birth of a Nation? Between 1930 and 67, 89% of the men executed for rape in the United States were Black, probably about 405 individuals. Mythical statements about Black rapists had their primary role in the justification of unlicensed terror against Black people in the wake of emancipation. And so when we look at what anti-miscegenation did, as I said earlier, it gave white men access to all women. And while Black-white sexual and love relations have historically been the stuff of prohibition, transgressive desire, and pornography, Indian white sexual and love relations have often been and continue to be wholesome white family fare. The marital love between John Smith and Pocahontas in Disney's animated Pocahontas is only the most recent instance of this. A white man finding an Indian woman alluring and in fact marrying her has seldom seemed to raise eyebrows or white eyebrows. So you understand this is what we call dichotomy, duplicity. There's just a ton of adjectives and words that we can apply to this. But these people are, this psychopathic behavior is narcissistic. It is savage. They are the original savages, not the Native Americans or the Africans that were here that morphed into the Native Americans. And so we're dealing with an ideology that I just really want you to look at and be able to see yourself in this data, to understand when Rev Shock comes to you and says nothing wrong with you, Rev Shock has the science to prove it. Like I can tell you exactly why ain't nothing wrong with you. And I can prove to you that you are a god and goddess having this experience. And I can take you as far back as you want to go and as high as you want to go cosmically to be able to do this. Now, as we are winding down here and understanding mixture, there was resistance to the marriages, but it did not come from among the 99%. It came from the ruling elite. Remember, this, we call it the 1% here. I don't know what you call it in Britain, but here we call it the 1%. And so 1664, Maryland lawmakers passed a law punishing English and other freeborn women who marry enslaved Negro men. Remember, I talked about that earlier. The law imposed serious consequences. The woman was enslaved for the duration of her husband's life, and any children the couple had were also enslaved into their 20s. The stated purpose for the law was to discourage these shameful matches, explaining that these women are forgetful of their status of English as English, who are deserving of rights and privileges from which others can be denied. And so when we look at this term privilege, privilege stands for a private law. Whiteness and white people are under a private law. That is where privilege comes from, completely invented. The law, however, had the opposite effect. Rather than deter marriages, they increased because landowners encouraged them. With each I do, the landowner's property value increased with another slave. It was not until 1681, when white people were invented, the lawmakers in Maryland amended the law of 1664 to correct for this result. The amended punishment, the amended punished English and other white women who married enslaved Negro men. And she says, this is Dr. Batalore, she says, did you catch, this is from my personal interview with her, did you catch the change in the language? This law represents one of the first appearances in law of a group of humanity called white people. This time, lawmakers got it right because they imposed punishment upon anyone found to have encouraged the marriage and upon the person who performed the ceremony. So now, again, we can take a deeper dive into this psychopathy. We don't have to use our opinions. We can shut it down whenever we are confronted by the AMU, second frequency European, whatever term you want to call them. We can shut them down because we have the actual law, we have the actual understanding, the framework, the context, the years, the dates, the whole thing of what happened that created this crazy, sick mentality that we are up against. So now let's go to number 3 in race technology, classifying.
Sarah,
Classifying. Oh, hold on. Let's take break. Break. Time out.
Segue there. Sorry. Some really good comments again. We had lots of comments about Jefferson, obviously, and some of these laws that were passed that was related to him. One person, I think it's Marshes, said, is this the same Jefferson who had relationships with his slaves? And
yes.
The other that is yes. I know he was supposed to have been with Sarah Hemmings and had several children with her. Mm-hmm. Another, Sharon has said hypocrites. Sophia has said this is the same. He's got black descendants now on TV as presenters, which I think is quite ironic. Mm-hmm. But the question that's come up here again, and I guess this is I suppose it's really difficult for us to get to soak all of this in. So we're trying to see from all areas now. I know you've kind of broken down why white people, how white people have come about, but we've got a question now about were white people made in any chemical capacity? So that's
no evidence of that. White people, quote unquote, is an ideology that was made into law. If we want to go into the chemical aspect of it, we have to go back into the Caucasus Mountains. We have to go back into and I can come back and do that, but come back and go into what happened to the African when they were turned inside out over 100,000, 300 years, depigmented themselves. Their phrenology began to change. I can take you into Glosier's law, Allen's law, Bergman's law, and so on and so forth, as to how the African turned white. Or should I say the African turned European, and then all of the breakdown of the psychosis that happens when you are intergenerationally, 44,000 generations into an ice age, birthed into an ice age, raising children, trying to educate them, which was impossible because it was a degeneration. It was a devolving, not an evolving, where we began and continued to evolve around the globe, the Africans in the Caucasus Mountains devolved and came out when the ice melted, barbaric. And so I can go into that, but that hopefully answers that question.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. The person who asked it, who is Sandra, has just said thank you for that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I asked that question a couple of times now and I've bypassed it. So not today, Sandra, not today.
Yeah, obviously I know what I'm doing when I come back. I know what
last question, before I let you get on, just one more, please.
Sure.
A question about these laws. It says, Michael says, all of this happened between 1681 to 84, according to...
No, 1664 to 1681.
Okay, so he says the slave codes were written in Barbados in 1661. Are there then links to what's happening currently worldwide, to what's quietly mandated now in Barbados and with its people? And I guess this is going a little bit off piece, but are the vaccines a new element to try and re-enslave? I might have opened it down.
So let me just do it this way. And I know sometimes it's hard to do a blanket statement because you don't want to do a blanket and put everybody in the same category, what have you. But we need African-centered politicians, presidents on down, to know this history. Most of the politicians and the people who set policy don't know this. And so they're acting within the psychopathic behavior that created the problem. Remember, Einstein says you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created the problem. You can't correct whiteness. You can't make it right. You can't be a little less racist. You either is or you isn't. And so when we understand that everything that we are dealing with today comes from this psychopathic behavior of these people coming out of the Caucasus Mountains, and finally, after thousands and thousands of years of fighting, ended up winning, and here we are today in the situation that we're in, you can't make this right. You have to first know the history behind the history, which is why they're trying to attack the First Amendment, attack our freedoms of getting this information. Two of the worst things that happened to white people and the European is, one, Frederick Douglass learning how to read, and second, the internet. Those are the two things that have killed all of this whiteness and Europeanism, is the information, is access to information, and primary information to find out what happened. How did this occur? What is the first causation of this? So hopefully that answered the question as we move into classifying. Now, when we talk about classifying, in 1892, Homer Plessy bought a first-class railway ticket and boarded. And I know some of you have heard of this, but I want to get deep into this today. And boarded a whites-only car in New Orleans, or as the New Orleanians call it, Nyawlins. That's called Nyawlins. Plessy, who had some minimal amount of Negro blood and was thus colored under Louisiana law, was in violation of the state's Separate Car Act. When the train conductor, in an arranged confrontation, ordered Plessy to vacate the seat and remove himself to the colored accommodations on the train, Plessy refused and was arrested. Plessy challenged the law, and his case eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, is now remembered for having posed the question of whether racial segregation was consistent with the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection for citizens. The court's notorious answer was yes. Separate was constitutional as long as it was equal. Separate but equal. Again, sociopathy, psychopathy, absolutely insane. This goes into Dr. Edwin Nichols' work of dichotomous logic. If anybody wants me to send them that show, there's three episodes that I did with Dr. Nichols, where he goes in deep, particularly this last appearance that he was on with us a few months ago, where he talked about dichotomous logic, we see dichotomous logic in this separate and equal concept. Now, Dr. Umar Johnson says on Vlad TV, he says, ministers said whites were the chosen people. Ministers now, ministers. Blacks cursed to be servants. God supported racial segregation. This is the sickness. You're born into this sickness. Craniologists, eugenicists, phrenologists, and social Darwinists said that every educational level reinforced the belief that blacks were in every way inferior to whites. Massive social disadvantages compounded by predatory lending and housing markets and legally regulating blacks into ghettos, discriminatory banking lending practices, severe job discrimination, not to mention the lynchings, all continued until the 60s. And I would say still going on to this day. Nancy Eisenberg says the Swedish botanist known as Carl von Linné, better known as Linnaeus, organized all plant and animal life and divided Homo sapiens, the word he coined for humans, into 4 varieties. So a European, we're using the term Homo sapien or Homo sapien sapien. Those are European constructs and terms. The European type, he said, was sanguine, brawny, acute, and inventive. The American Indian he deemed choleric and obstinate. Yet free. The Asian was melancholic and greedy, and the African was crafty, indolent, and negligent. So this is where the psychopathy comes from. I'm bringing you this technology to understand that classifying, mixing, and stating, and then we're going to get into the 4th one. This is what is constantly going. This is what we're fighting against right here, is the race technology, the scientific aspects of racism as it has been created. Social Darwinism is the application of the evolutionary concept of natural selection to human society. And so you got Linnaeus, Bloomberg, Christopher Miners. When we look at this meme on the right, the ongoing identity crisis of the American Negro, even that statement is wrong, because it's not the ongoing crisis of the Negro, it's the ongoing crisis of the African, the original people, first frequency people. But look at all of the terms, all of the classifications, all of the stating from the 1800s to the 2000s. Look at what we've done to ourselves. We are participating and complicit in our own racial inequality. Does that make sense, family? That now we can't see, nothing's wrong with you. Something happened to you. You're not a nigger, a darky, a pickaninny, a coon, a spook, a boy, a colored, Negroes, brothers, blacks, African Americans, niggas. You're not any of that. You're gods or goddesses having that experience. Somebody made you that. Somebody labeled you that. And when you're born, your nervous system is not fully developed. Your brain is not fully developed. If your mother and father uses those words and calls you and your sister, brother, and aunts, uncles, and their parents these names, then you're going to do the same thing. I remember when I asked the question, when did I become a nigger? When did Rev Shock become a nigger? When did somebody come up to me and say, "What's up, my nigga?" And I turned around and said, "What's up, my nigga? How you doing?" When did that psychopathy happen in me? When did it happen in you? These are the questions we have to ask our children, but we have to ask ourselves first. You are not a nigger. You are not a Negro. You are a god or a goddess having a Negro or nigger experience. Classifying states that the Enlightenment scientists who first divided humanity, remember that word, divided humanity into 5 races and coined Caucasian. Battle Lore says white people were a tool by which 99% were divided from each other. That's why white people were invented and made. The black runaway indentured servant in 17th century Virginia, whose capture and sentencing to lifelong servitude marked the first official sanctioning of chattel slavery. And the first time a black person was treated differently from a white person in law in colonial America. Battle Lore says, I did a show where we talked about the concept of good white people, which can't happen. Here's what she said. She says, it wasn't until after Darwin's Origin of Species and the naturalists who followed Linnaeus and Blumenbach out of Germany, what they did 100 years later, 100 years later from 1681, where the first assertion in law referencing a group of people called white people, not until 1770s that these naturalists first organized plants and animals began to start organizing humanity using a hierarchy. So what she's talking about here, fam, is you have 100 years of the invention of white people and intergenerational white people being born into this concept of whiteness and ideology. But it took another 100 years to create the concept, the false racial construct of race. So what they were trying to do in the Enlightenment time and the social Darwinism, they were trying to make white and whiteness biological. That's why some of us are still to this day even confused, because white is not biological. But the scientists of the time, 100 years later, in order to keep this lie alive, had to invent false science. She says that, of course, all of these naturalists themselves are people of European descent. She says, I'm sure you and your audience will be absolutely shocked to learn that the people who were at the top, the superior humans, were of course those like them, Europeans. They had various groups who fell beneath them, who were constructed as inferior to the European. So Ballilora goes on to say the human taxonomy would not survive scientific muster today, not by a long shot. To start, the evidence Linnaeus and others relied on was not direct observation. They often relied upon the notes of European travelers. Today, anthropologists and other social scientists understand what Linnaeus saw as traits, not to be to be nothing innate at all, but rather external and cultural. So external and cultural, not biological. Also, it should go not go without notice that the group with the most positive traits happens to be the one shared by the scientists who created them. They place themselves on top above all others. So as we talk about classifying, what has been forgotten about the case in popular memory in the Plessy, from the Plessy lawyers, had launched a direct attack upon the very idea of distinct Black and white races, not just as an attack on racial segregation. So here was the argument. The argument was Plessy is of mixed Caucasian and African descent in the proportion of 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood. The mixture of colored blood is not discernible in him, and he is entitled to every recognition, right, privilege, and immunity secured to citizens of the white race by the Constitution and the laws of the United States. He was really a white man classed as a colored man. Now, when we talk about people who are mixed, look at Meghan Markle. This could have been her. She could have, this is what she's going through right now because she has that drop of blood, that drop of Black blood in her, but she is trying to live in a completely European white life. And this is what Plessy was. Plessy denied his Blackness and wanted the white privilege. This is where the concept of the Negro comes from. In order to survive in America, you got to be a good Negro. So you go to church, you believe in these three white boys, the white boy on the stick, the white boy in the sky, and the white boy on a boat, Columbus, who started all this mess. And you're a good Negro, and you stay in your place and stay in your lane. Because white is supposed to be right, and it's not. But this is what we're dealing with. So I'm putting all of this, I'm bombarding you with this so you can understand what has happened to us, but how it relates to what's happening to us right now. Plessy's lawyers meant to challenge what is commonly known as the one-drop rule. The one-drop rule, as a race-mixing technique, has the effect of producing discrete, mutually exclusive Black and white races in the social and legal imaginaries. As Plessy learned, the race line is literally a line. clear, indelible, and permanent. If slavery and freedom were to be mutually exclusive legal statutes, and if slavery was to be justified by race, something needed to be done, if not practically, then at least conceptually, about miscegenation and racial hybridity. In defense of slavery, the one-drop rule became customary by the 1850s. A person who was obviously of even some Negro descent riding in a whites-only car would threaten the entire arbitrary system of racial privilege and exclusion. The one-drop rule also helped to guarantee to whites that they could in no way come to be classified as blacks, and that was happening to blacks could never have, and what was happening to blacks could never happen to them, because the classificatory boundary was was crystal clear to everyone. Now, when you look at a psychopathic behavior, we have to understand, family, look at how this is backfiring on them. See, everything that they've done is wrong. And now, as Malcolm would say, chickens have come home to roost. So all of this fighting that we're dealing with is from a lie. It's from what we call in metaphysics of falsehood. You can't make a lie right. You can't make white right. So as a result, even back then, they're going up against their own rules and laws and trying to ratify them and modify them and make the white right, but it's always been wrong. And this is why it's coming to a head. The one-drop rule, in other words, was critical in securing the participation of all whites in white supremacy, right? We could end the show with that. While white privilege derived from naturalization law goes beyond common law, common everyday assumptions about who is presumed to be American, it also has shaped how people are commonly referenced. Americans with descendants from Asia, for example, are referred to as Asian Americans. From Africa, African Americans. From the Americas, Native Americans, or Hispanic Americans, or Latinx, while those with descendants from Europe are simply called American. So all other people, ethnicities living in this country are pseudo-American, contingent American. You're African American, Asian American, Latinx American, Mexican American, so on and so forth. But to be American is to be white, is to, in their minds, to be supreme. And we know that is to be psychopathic, sociopathic, and you cannot negotiate with a psychopath. The last of the technologies. Here's where, do you have a question, comment for me, Lady Adele or Jarita?
Yeah, I do, sir. I do. Thank you so much. I was just about.
I helped you out this time, didn't I? Okay, I just want to.
Yes, I do. I know you've given us lots of definitions just there about what, this one-drop rule and how that kind of works, but lots of questions here about wanting sort of a real definitive answer. Is being mixed race being black? Would you consider mixed race people half black, half white? Are they black? Lots of people asking that question, so I need to just put it out there and get a definitive answer.
Sure. All humanity comes from African. So regardless of what you were mixed with, have been mixed with, you are African. Now, whether you accept that or not, whether you identify as such or not, that's on you. But you are African, and I don't like to use the word black because in order to be black, you have to have a white, and that was that whole process of vocabulary to make the opposites or what have you. So I just like to use the term African. There's only one humanity. There's only one, if you even want to use the term race, and that's African. So to answer the question, yes, it is. However, even Meghan Markle, because everything comes from Africa. And so when we look at Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work, and we understand genetic annihilation, one of the things that they attempted to do, I forgot, I think the movie is called The Rabbit Test or something like that, where they try to breed, how many generations would it take to breed Africans or melanin out of Black people or African people. I think it was John G. James that said it was 16 generations. So they literally did this test where they tried to homogenize, and now think about this. Europeans are the minority on the planet, always has been. And so in order for them to survive, now they're using mixing as a weapon. Let's impregnate as many Black women as we possibly can around the world, so that our original false race of whiteness and Europeanness can survive. So I don't know if that answered your question, but to understand what is happening right now, to bring it from the past up to now, mixing all of these technologies now is weapons used against us, not for us. But if we don't know that, and God forbid we have been told that something's wrong with us because we are mixed, nothing's wrong with you. What happened to you is what I am presenting to you in this science and in this process, but you have to work that out within yourself. You don't have to necessarily choose a side. You already are an African, but if you have been proselytized and conditioned and told that Black ain't right, or Black is whack and white is right, you're going to have inner conflict, because you're in a society and a system that if you align with European values, if you align with whiteness, you're going to get rewarded. And so what it takes is for people like Andrew Muhammad, Lady Adele, the folks that are watching right now, myself, the scholars, to stand up and say hell no, we won't go. Africa is the humanity of all civilization and the entire world. And it's time for us to bring back our rightful, the European, the African who went into the Caucasus Mountain, who depigmented themselves over 100,000 years, that was a freak of nature. The African is a fact of nature. Yeah, it's painful. I know it's divisive. It makes white people or European people feel like they originally felt, like barbarism, and looking at what that psychopathic behavior did when they came out of the mountains, out of the Caucasus Mountains. Look at what they did. Look at what they did. Look at their history. Healthy people, mentally healthy people, don't act this way. They don't act this way historically. They don't act this way socially. Something is wrong with these people. And so, but you have to understand what happened to them, because just as nothing's wrong with us, in a sense, nothing's wrong with them. Something happened to them. But what happened to them was due to nature. And coming out of that nature and seeing that the entire planet was dominated and ran by African people, they had to use violence and psychopathic behavior in order to survive, because they're still a minority and they're losing power. And this is why they act the way they do. But understand that, imagine we have a story. We have an original story. We are the best of God, of the Creator, chosen first, which is where first frequency comes from. The first idea, the first gestation. They have a secondary story, and their story starts in the mountains, being depigmented, coming out of the Caucasus Mountains and going into the Dark Ages. So no matter what happens in a conversation or a debate, the result is always the same. Africans are superior because it was created by the Creator first. Everything and all other ethnicities coming out of that is part of that whole, but there always will be a first. And so if you try to make white right and try to make white above African, or white or European above African, you're a complete idiot. It just can't be done because the history does not match up. Go ahead.
One last question before I let you to get on. There's a few questions now that have come up and said, in which case, looking at the terminology then, obviously you've said that a little bit about being Black and being African and being white, and obviously all of that kind of being made up, I guess. So the questions now are, what should we be calling white people? And, you know, what should we be calling Black people? And is African even the right term? If, you know, what was the true word for Africa? So that's the question.
There is a word, and I can't remember the name, the original word, but just as the Dogon referred to God as Amma, Medu Neter is our original language. It is the language from which all languages linguistically have been created. The more we go back, this is Sankofa, the more we go back to come forward to learn our original language, to learn the original meaning of Kemet, of the Twa and Buti people, the better off we are in terms of restoring our wholeness and to being able to radiate that first frequency. So I struggle with the concept of using the term Black and white as well, but it's not Black and white, it's European and African. But then that's the name of the continent that you're from, which was originally how we referred to one another, because there was no such thing as Black or white people. It didn't exist. And so that's one of the things that we have to consciously do. There's a concept I'll bring to you and probably in the next few months ahead in talking about what's known as the ABC cycle, affect, behavior, cognition. And what happens, affect is a thought. When that thought is not challenged, it moves into a behavior. And when the behavior is not challenged, it moves into cognition, which is being repetitive. And so we have to catch that ABC cycle. We have to stop when we say Black and say African. When we say white, European. We have to mentally catch ourselves and correct ourselves from the false indoctrination of software from the media and from the academic system that we're in. Is it okay if I move forward now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. All right, number 4, spacing. Racial segregation in the United States was and is all about clearly marking off white space from Black space. There's the Black and white thing again, right? Jim Crow involved segregation of all aspects of daily life, segregation of railways, which was challenged by Homer Plessy. Jim Crow laws in the South prohibited Black and white workers from fraternizing on the job, separated the races in hospitals and mental institutions, and segregated inmates in prisons. Separate park laws also appeared, and circuses, tent shows, sideshows, theaters, picture houses, and other amateur sports teams were increasingly required to separate the races. Segregation was even went so far as Jim Crow Bibles or Negro witnesses in Atlanta courts and Jim Crow elevators for Negro passengers in Atlanta buildings. Now, beyond the classic Jim Crow segregation social space, residential segregation has also been and continues to be one of the inescapable facts of Blackness and whiteness in the United States. And going back to the question that was asked earlier about Black and white, in order for whiteness to exist, it has to have an opposite, and that is the Black. So that's why it's just the language alone of the European language. We're speaking English. It is the most false language of all the languages. So this is why we have to educate ourselves to understand our true African heritage. But by doing so and learning our first frequency language, our first frequency state and way of being, we become bilingual versus just identifying as one false identification. So in other words, I can speak Negro, I can speak nigger, I can speak European, but I am first frequency African because I don't identify as a Negro, as a nigger. I don't identify as a thug or a baby mama or what. I speak those languages when I'm in those communities, in those cities, in those zip codes, but I don't identify as such. And so one of the things we have to do is begin separating ourselves from our zip code. What did you learn in your zip code? When you were born, where you were born, how you were born, your environment. You've got to become bigger than that. We'll talk about that momentarily. The techniques by which residential segregation has been produced has historically included intimidation, terror, and discrimination in housing and home finance markets. We are all familiar with the geography of race produced by these practices, as well as by public policies such as urban renewal, clearly demarcated lines between largely homogeneous Black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods. Now, the boundary is stark, clear, and every American knows about it and keeps it in the back of their mind, so as not to be dangerously out of place. Even in New York's diverse Elmhurst Corona study by Richard Sanjak, in which peoples and languages run into each other in a mix never before seen. Blacks are segregated in one housing development. Black people are kept and largely remain in their place. Now, I did an interview years ago with Richard Rothstein. He was at the time a part of the Economic Policy Institute, the EPI. And he wrote a paper called The Making of Ferguson. This was during the time that Mike Brown was murdered. And he did this white paper called The Making of Ferguson. And it was absolutely fascinating. I started interviewing this guy, and that paper that he wrote became his book, which was The Color of Law. Every metropolitan area in this country, talking about America, I don't know how it is there in the UK, has segregation, residential segregation. The residential segregation, most people think it happened by accident, or because white flight, or because of private prejudice, or because real estate agents were steering people to one place rather than another. He says, but in fact, the neighborhoods in every metropolitan area in this country was segregated by federal policy. It was the law. Just like we talked about those 3 anti-miscegenation laws that came down, where you couldn't take legal action against the new designation of white people, you couldn't own guns or gunpowder, you couldn't vote or run for office. It was the law, and the law mandated this. And so this is why it is not your fault that you were born into a particular zip code. It was designed that way. And so if you identify with your zip code, you are going to go and be lost in translation. You'll never reach your fullest potential because you're going to loop. You're going to be on a treadmill running to stand still because of this crazy ideological people put you into a zip code and forced your parents and parents' into a way of life that you think you're free, that you think you chose your house, you think you chose your school, you think you chose your academic programs, you think you chose your food store, your furniture. No, it was already manifested and manufactured for you before. Deliberate, purposeful, federal policy, and by state, local policy as well. We have a government-sponsored system. Government-sponsored system, he says, of racial segregation. So when we talk about this concept of racial segregation and spacing, we're talking about redlining. It's a systemic denial of various services or goods by federal government agencies, local governments, or the private sector, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. This is often manifested by placing strict criteria on specific services and goods that often disadvantage poor and minority communities. Now think about this. Why do you think there are more churches in poor communities and poor zip codes? There are more taverns. There are more liquor stores. There's more strip malls and strip malls and strip clubs in these. Why do you think that is? That's the zip code that you were born into, that you were forced into. Your job, our job, my job is to break you free and break from that false zip code and to expand to find out, who am I originally? It's almost analogous, family, to finding out that after 50, 60, 70 years, your parents were not your biological parents. Imagine the identity crisis that you might go through and grow through to come home back to Africa, back to your first frequency, to realize and recognize who you've always been. But you've been born into this lie, told this lie, and the people around you live this lie. As a result, you think that what you're doing is right, but you'll never be free. Prior to the Fair Housing Act of 1968, there were no specific laws that protected minority populations from discriminatory practices in housing and commercial markets. Businesses were therefore able to exploit these groups in order to increase their profits. Redlining was utilized in the housing industry by mortgage companies to suppress minority populations from recovering home loans to buy homes in other neighborhoods, as well as to deny them the funds to improve their current home. So it didn't matter if you qualified and had the money to buy into a good neighborhood or house, you weren't allowed. So it didn't matter. It didn't matter. See, this is why they're so upset. Think about this. The fact that you and I are having this conversation right now, only a God could do that. Only a God could survive this onslaught that we have been dealing with for the last 500 years or 1,000 years, however long you want, whenever the Amu came out. Imagine, we have to be, this is why I'm a proponent of first frequency. We have to be gods and goddesses because only a god or a goddess could survive this. This was an annihilation. You know, you see these movies about space aliens coming and destroying Earth and destroying the people. Well, that's what they tried to do. These people are like aliens, right? They're so psychopathic. They're like aliens, but guess what? We still survive. We still get up every day. We still regenerate. And they hate us for it because we're gods. We don't die. We multiply. That's why I know for a fact we are the best of the best, because no other ethnicity could have and did survive what they put on. Even their own species could not survive what they've done. Asians couldn't survive it. Arabs couldn't survive it. The African is the strongest, most durable, venerable species of human in human history, period, end of story. This directly contributed to the spatial isolation of minority communities, a reality which incurred wide-ranging impacts. Physical isolation resulted in political isolation, as these residentially isolated minority communities or groups had local political needs that increased affordable government subsidized housing and improved access to home loans that did not overlap with white majority groups, making political alliances difficult. Spatial isolation also led to cultural and linguistic isolation, as the urban underclass came to resent signs of the dominant white culture, which they viewed as hypocritical. Now, this was the beginning remember I came on and I talked about you only get two opportunities in America to be a Negro or a nigger. So the Negro was the ones who were allowed to get an education, go to school, have some kind of income, and align with white values, and go to a white school, get a white education, a good European education, and now I'm protected. I'm protected because I'm not a nigger. I'm not those niggas out here in these streets. See, this is where the cultural isolation, the spatial isolation comes in, and how the nigger concept was invented. The nigger, the fourth frequency, rejected wanting to be in alignment with the Negro, third frequency, and did not and saw the hypocrisy of second frequency, the European. And so because we are so far removed from our original people, the memory has been lost, but the genetic memory remains that we are first frequency people. And so the nigga is actually, the brothers and sisters out here on the streets are actually closer to the creator and the waters of none than the third frequency, who did everything white that was supposed to be right. Get the education, get the job, get the money, get the bag, raise the kids, go to church, believe in this white boy on a stick, Jesus, believe in the white boy in the sky, God, believe in all these white deities. You're made in the image and the likeness of God, but God is white in your right and white world. That's a lost generation of people. We have to say it's literally, it's the quote unquote, the nigga fourth frequency is actually going to save the third frequency from themselves, because some of them won't be able to be saved because they have been indoctrinated successfully. They have been completely domesticated and colonized successfully. And as a result, they can't see themselves being 100% African and first frequency. So Rothstein says this. He says, we've adopted this myth that we have something called de facto segregation. It sort of just happened. Because of white flight or private prejudice, we have segregation by law, public policy. It was created that way. The policy has persisted throughout the 20th century. Simply passing laws that say you can't discriminate doesn't undo any of the segregation that existed in the past. It transferred from generation to generation. When we hear that term or hear that word transferred, that's intergenerational, that's epigenetic, transferred from one generation to the next. You see, it doesn't matter that the law changed. What originally happened has a cascading domino effect that we are experiencing right now. Umar Johnson says, in terms of spacing, mass incarceration is another aspect of the technology of racism to keep us separate from each other and from having power and from our white European people. He says, we're not going to give them a job means that these black men and women have to do what? They have to break the law to feed their family. See, this is why I go out here and I go on the internet and I tell my brothers and sisters, if you're selling drugs or using drugs, if you are stripping or selling your body, you are closer to the creator than anyone, because you decided to do something to survive, to pay your bills, feed your family, because the other option was to be sold out and pimped out and legally enslaved as a Negro. And so my brothers and sisters out there who are struggling in these streets, I'm speaking to you right now knowing that you are loved and you are seen and you are held in the highest of all humanity, because nothing's wrong with you. This is what has been done to you, that you are not a stripper. You are not a drug dealer, a drug user. You are having this experience because you made a decision, consciously or unconsciously, that white wasn't right, that I'm not going to align and lead with these enslaved, sick, psychopathic people. I'm not going to be this good go-along Negro believing in some white deity. I'm not going to do it. You paid the ultimate price, and that price is how you're living right now. But I want you to know there's an answer, and that is your first frequency, to know that you are a god or a goddess having this experience. And so the reason that I developed this entire ministry is to give our people out there who are struggling the most, the ones who are impoverished, the ones who can't pay their bills. You are the best of us, because you're the strongest and the strong of us, because you were made that way. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it hurts. No, you don't see necessarily a way out. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I want you to know that we acknowledge you. I see you. First frequency sees you. And that is what wakes you up every single morning. This is not about hope, family. It's now about how. We don't need hope anymore. We need how. And this is what Andrew is bringing to the community, which is why I rock with him. He's not bringing hope. He don't sell hope. He sells how. Okay. And so when we understand what we are doing here, and that you are a part of a history, that you're not, it's not by accident that you're on this program watching this right now. Okay. There's a reason, and it's much bigger than you can even fathom. Right. Even with Brother Andrew and Goddess Adele and Goddess Jaretta, you have no idea what you're doing. You have been chosen to do something. This work that you're doing, this is an assignment. This is an assignment from a higher power, from your creator. That's why you're doing what you're doing. Now, Umar goes on to say, so what did they do?
So before you
create this.
tell us what they do, can I just ask a couple of questions, or should I come back another time?
Well, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. So can I finish this out and then we can have our Q&A?
Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate that. So he says, so what did they do to create this mass incarceration system, which was designed to do what? Remove blacks from the functioning society, get them out of the way so they don't threaten anything we're trying to do. Talking about white people, the European concept. He says, so what they do? They upgraded petty crimes and made them felonies. If you don't have a job, you go to jail. If you don't have a home, you go to jail. If you are out past the curfew, you go to jail. You don't have an ID, you go to jail. This is the sickness of spacing that is part of the technology. Any little petty offense, Dr. Umar Johnson says, could put you in prison for years. This was done intentionally. Why? Because the former plantation owners needed workers and they didn't want to pay for them. So what's the cheapest form of labor? Mass incarceration. The ex-slave and then force the ex-slave and then force them out, hire them out, contract them out onto the chain gang. Same thing they are doing today. This was done by design. At the end of the Civil War, there was no large-scale federal prison system. And we can go into Michelle Alexander's work, The New Jim Crow, that codifies all of this information that Dr. Umar is talking about and what I'm presenting today. You didn't have the sophisticated statewide prison networks that you have today. So as we move out of this, I found this, of course, I'm sure many of you have already seen it, Joe Morton in Dinner in America. When we look at somebody asked earlier, how should we look at the AMU? How should we look at second frequency white people and race technology? You look at it as a virus, a thought virus. It's a thought ideological virus is what we're dealing with.
Contribute, say something. You want me to say something? Fine, I'll say something. You people, you're not a race. You are a virus. You destroy the world. Everything beautiful, you poison. You drag us from our homes, you rape our daughters, murder our... You crack our spines and do all you can to break our will. You stab us. Then you put the knife in our hand and tell us it's our fault. And if you don't do it yourself, you stand by, close your eyes, and pretend there's nothing wrong. And then you pray to your God to silence our screams so that you can enjoy the happiness that we built for you with our blood. But it's not your fault. It's the only way you know how to be. And the only thing that will change anything is if another virus comes along and does to you what you do to us.
So this triggered, I love that piece. Joe Morton is just one of the baddest ass actors of all times. I just love that brother. He did a piece I did when he was on Scandal talking about "You Are a Boy" to Fitzgerald. He's just, nobody can deliver those lines like Joe Morton. He is the GOAT, literally. But I want to talk about this concept called the Django Unchained syndrome. You know, when Django when Django got his freedom, and decided to, what does freedom look like? And he's going to put on this, at the time, he's putting on this blue suit, and he goes to Candyland, and the slaves, the house slave and the field slaves, all are looking at him as, who is this N-word on this nag? Because what happens when you are successfully proselytized, domesticated, successfully racially categorized, when you're successfully spaced, when you're successfully classified, when you're successfully separated from mixture and stated, you can't see Africa. You can't see your own people. And so you've been socially engineered not to know, like, or want, or recognize first frequency Africans, gods and goddesses. So there's some not watching this program, but there's some people in your life that absolutely hate you, will try to even kill you, maybe at the minimum will marginalize, minimize you, make you feel guilty, make you feel dumb, make you feel stupid, make you feel less than, because they don't know who the hell they are. They don't know what you know. They don't know that you are a god or a goddess having this human experience. And so they can't see you. As much as you scream and say, hey, go watch this program with Andrew Muhammad, go check out this YouTube video. Some don't even do it. And then what's really painful to watch is when somebody does watch and participate in a program like this and betrays and can't see it, and betrays their own people and can't see it. So when we see people like Stacey Dash and folks of sort, we understand that nothing's wrong with them. This is what happened to them, but in a very real sense, they've lost their mind. Niggas see niggas. Negroes see Negroes. Did you get that? So it doesn't matter if you're a PhD, it doesn't matter if you're a god or a goddess. A nigga, in the mindset of a nigga, they see you as another nigga. If you are a good go-along Negro, the Negro is only going to be able to see a god or goddess as they see themselves, which is Negro. I want you to really get this, family, because nobody's talking about this. Nobody is breaking this down in this manner. And only Andrew Muhammad can bring on a Reverend Shock, because most people are terrified of Reverend Shock, because I'm the Bernie Mac of metaphysics. So I keep it real. You are not able to see yourself outside of your zip code and your environment when you have been successfully racially, socially engineered with this race technology, with this scientific racism. It has stopped you from reaching your highest potential. It's caused you to trigger a backfire effect to your original spiritual system. You believe that the Bible is real. You believe that this white boy on a stick is real. This is how you know you have been successfully socially engineered and conditioned to think and be a particular way. And a detriment to your own self. This is why you're ashamed to be African. This is why you will always self-sabotage your higher frequency relationships and opportunities. How many opportunities have you had? How many relationships have you messed up? Because your brain and mind is messed up because you've been conditioned and programmed that way, but you don't know that you're conditioned and programmed. And even if you did, you deny it because you think you're in control. You think you know what you're doing. And it's a difference between being right versus being free. This is why you'll always attract insurmountable problems and challenges in your life. You have been conditioned to fail at birth and even before your birth, which is epigenetic. You hate yourself and those who remind you of yourself, because guess what? You are not yourself. You're not a nigga. You're not a Negro. You're not a baby mama. You're not a baby daddy. You're not a thug. You're not a thought. You're not a bitch. You're not a hoe. You're not any of those things. But if you believe you are and you identify as such, so be it. The universe responds to your frequency. It does not recognize your personal desires, wants, or needs. It only understands the frequency in which you are vibrating at. For example, if you are vibrating in the frequency of fear, guilt, or shame, you are going to attract things on a similar vibration. If you are vibrating in the frequency of love, joy, and abundance, you are going to attract things that support that frequency. It's kind of like tuning into a radio station. You have to be tuning into the music you want to listen to, just like you have to be tuned into the energy you want to manifest in your life. Change your mindset. It will change your life. So as we move forward, what we need to stop doing is stop caring about what white people think. We stop caring about white people's opinions. Stop trauma bonding with the technologies of race. We talked about that the last time I was here. Stop living the false racial construct and sub-labels of third and fourth frequency. Negroes and niggas don't exist. Stop identifying as a thug, thought, bitch, hoe, baby mama, baby daddy. That is not you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something happened to you, family. And so before I go into this, did we have questions, comments?
Yes, sir. Yes, tons of them. How much time?
Well, okay. Let me do this then. Let me just close out. So
All right.
everybody, let me just close this out because we're done. Let me close out. If you want to get deep down and dirty with me, right? If you want some rev shock in your life on a regular basis, on a regular for real, as they say, come to my Patreon because I'm getting ready to start to do live lessons where I start to really break down this and have a conversation with you one-on-one with just our Patreon members. So you go to patreon.com/rev shock. Of course, you know about my streaming EP, Nothing's Wrong with Us, Something Happened to Us by the Metaphysical Morpheus himself. So you can check that out on whatever streaming platform works for you. We have a free Affinity e-course that you can sign up to, firstfrequency.com, the number 1 stfrequency.com, and practice first frequency specificity daily. And we do that by invoking the law of 7 and reciting our affirmation of power and prosperity 7 times, 7 days a week. I am one with first frequency. I am one with the first thought idea. I am one with the firstborn people. I am one with the only one. Ashe, and so it is. Uncle Job Seneb, Ashe, and so it is, family. Life, prosperity, and health. Please share this content with everyone that you come in contact with. I am stopped sharing my screen. Let me come back on here and be with Brother Andrew and the gods and goddesses.
Come on.
Okay. I'm sweating over here.
Brothers and sisters, where's the ones? Where are the ones? You lot are joking on my platform today. Where are the damn ones? This brother,
not just the ones, the damn ones.
Come on.
I love your excitement, Andrew. I swear, I really do. You're just amazing to me.
That's right. Let's see those ones rain down.
Oh, yes.
There's gods in the house tonight.
Facts.
Let the brother know how much he smelled. Put that smelly. The man smellified the platform tonight.
I love that.
The man stank. Lord, gosh, brothers. He came smelling and stinking. Oh my gosh.
I will take a shower after I'm done talking to y'all right now, just so you understand that I don't, gotta wash that Rev Shock funk off is what you gotta do.
Over 440 still on the platform, brothers. We nearly touched that 500, but there's over 400 plus. Let the brother know that he smelt tonight. Lord gosh. Lick shot pon Babylon, rice and peas, buffalo soldier, dreadlock rasta. Jeez. Oh wow.
Goodness.
Oh wow, Jurita.
That's great.
We've got 5 minutes, man, to choose the best lines you want to choose.
Oh no!
You only got 5 minutes there. I know the platform's been flooded tonight because the brother ripped up the history books, man. Come on.
All right, sir, I've had Sean send me this question twice. So Sean, thank you for being patient with me. His question is naga or nega, or however you want to say it, a better word to use to describe ourselves? As it's
no,
the ancient
because if the reason is to try to find an alternate word for nigga, it ain't right. Just call yourself African or Nubian or Ethiopian, wherever your tribe, wherever we're from, that's what we need to identify as. But we're all African, which is where the term Pan-African and what it means to be Pan-African.
Great.
So I don't like those hybrids of the N-word. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Thank you so much. We had a few comments. I mean, the whole time you've been speaking about this first frequency, had somebody ask a question, Angela, which first frequency language should we be learning?
Medu Neter. Like at the end of the program, I said Uncle Job Seneb, that's Medu Neter. Life, prosperity, and health. So Dr. Riketi Amen is the Dean of Medu Neter. Infudishi, brother, God, I'm looking right at him, wears glasses, beautiful brother out of New York. Can't think of his name. Baba Haru, who is one of our greatest kings. All teach the original language, and I am learning it, and it's the original language of Kemet. What I have come to learn about our original first frequency language is that the African brain, again, this goes back to the perfection of being created by perfection, because the creator is perfect in all of its male and female ways, that we are full brain people, and what they call a hieroglyph, one meta nature symbol could have an entire library or encyclopedia. That's how deep we were, or should I say how deep we are. So we really need to embrace that and learn our original language. By learning our original language, we start to naturally emit and emote our natural and highest level of frequency.
Thank you so much. So I just want to say that there's been a lot of comments come through on, I'm just not dealing with the questions now, but a lot of comments have come through saying, or giving thanks really for what you've delivered tonight. It was to such a great standard, high standard. Lots of people have been praising what you've done. One comment in particular, though, I think sort of stands out for me out of all of them, and it was made about 20 or maybe 25 minutes ago. It was by somebody called Reject, I think, and they said, I'm feeling like a god right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that alone really just epitomized what the feeling of this session was like. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for that.
So there are a few more questions on this chat. I don't know if you're going to be staying around for a while. Otherwise, could I give some people some of your contact details, maybe to ask you anything that they
Sure, absolutely. And if you have some more, I don't know what, Andrew, what your time frame is, but if you got
time has gone. I just want to bring in, I want to thank Sister Jarita. You've absolutely done a Piers Morgan on Reverend Shock today. You held him in a headlock and and literally asked the questions, man. And Reverend Shock was just firing back the answers, man. It was brilliant seeing you two in motion. It was just fantastic. Lady
thank you, brother.
Lady Adele has a quick question. And I know if I don't allow Lady Adele in, man, her followers will absolutely hump me down tomorrow morning.
We don't want that. We need you. So go ahead, Lady Adele.
Reverend Shock's lovely to speak to you again, sir. Oops.
As well, Goddess.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. I can. A little echo, but I can hear you.
Right, I've sorted that out. So let's have a look. Yes, so Reverend Shock, I just wanted to raise something, because I know in America it's a lot about separation. But in Europe and England in particular, it's all about multiculturalism. And it's all about mixing. Although we have this separation ideology, there's a thinking called a clergy plan, which is all about, within Europe, mixing everybody together, mixing everybody from all around the world together, with the aim of having no clear identity group of people, so that a master race and can come over and kind of dominate and direct. What I'm just was interested in is about your views on multiculturalism, because that's a very English or European way versus the American, which is all about separatism.
So separatism and multiculturalism, in order to be multicultural, you have to first be the highest representation of your culture. So if you don't identify as African, or you don't like being African, you don't have a culture. You then are diluted in your culture. So you can't be multicultural and not know who you are and get lost in somebody else's culture. So I think, and I had this conversation with Dr. Joy DeGruy a few years ago, who, of course, I don't know if everybody knows her. She created the term PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and wrote the best-selling book. And she talked about this concept. We were having coffee. She talked about this concept of bringing a segregation back, in a sense, because the original segregation caused us and forced us to work together, but we had more of an identity of our culture. But because they made it so difficult and so painful to be truly African and live in our own African society, we started looking at white ice being colder and wanting whiteness and European values. And that's where the Negro really began to show themselves who they are and began to deny their African culture. And so multiculturalism is fine. If I go to India, I'm going as an African going to India. I'm not getting lost in Indian culture. So it doesn't matter where I'm at on the planet. I am African first frequency first. And I am the original king. I am the original God of all humanity. Every human being, every culture, every ethnicity that I explore, that I meet, I know came from me and my goddess, the first mother.
Lady Adele, is there any, does that answer your question? Was there anything more?
Yep. Thank you very much, Reverend Shock. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Adele.
Reverend Shock, you did not hold back tonight. Brothers and sisters, what a night. What a night. Myself and Reverend, we will be doing a joint event coming up soon. We're still putting the things together.
Yes.
This one will be a paid event, but we are going to be collapsing time. I'm not going to go too much into it yet until we start promoting it properly. But as you know, this brother is known as a metaphysical Morpheus, and we're going to destroy what we call the matrix. And as many of you know, my platform, my mother workshop is the matrix. And so, brothers and sisters, look out for it very soon. We will be doing a joint event, collapsing time within the matrix, brothers and sisters. It's going to be crazy.
Looking forward to that. That's going to be huge.
Reverend, that's going to be crazy when we come with that one together.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I can't wait. We're working on it. We're going to get you guys a date and a time soon. But imagine learning the process of how to truly reinvent yourself, regardless of what has happened to you, regardless of how much time you think you've lost, regardless of your age, regardless of your current economic status, regardless of what has happened to you, you will be able to collapse time, get your time back, and be on time and in time. Because one of the things that they also stole when they stole us from our home was they stole our time. And the other piece to that is because they were frozen in time, the only way they can move forward is to freeze us in their time. And now it's time for us to get our time back. And Baba Andrew Muhammad and myself are going to put together a piece, a training piece. This is some of my deepest work, metaphysical manifestation work, because I've reinvented myself so many doggone times. I don't know who I am sometimes when I look in the mirror. I'm like, who? When he was introducing me and everybody was talking about rest, I'm like, who the hell is he talking? Oh, he's talking. Oh, that's me. Okay, yeah. So I want you to become unrecognizable to yourself. I want you to grow and reach a potential so high that you become unrecognizable to yourself. That I don't care how low you are. I don't care what you've done, what's been done to you. I know that you can be reinvented to be the highest manifesting African god or goddess that the world has ever seen. I know this, I've seen this, and I've worked with these people. And so I'm looking forward to the future with Baba Andrew Muhammad to have this process in place.
So, brothers and sisters, this is going to be really exclusive. So look out for it from when we announce it. We're just putting behind the scenes, putting some, and it could be developed into a course. There'll be a range of literature that can be produced with this, because we are absolutely going to open up the matrix, brothers and sisters. We're going to break this what they call the seal. You know what I mean? We're going to be breaking the seal. And so this is for those of you that want to take this on if you love tonight and you want to take it deeper as well, personally with us, we're going to be opening the doors very soon for that. So we've got things planned that's coming down the line, okay, brothers and sisters, and it's going to be absolutely crazy. I want to use this time to really thank the team. Sister China, my daughter, the mini investigator. You've been working behind the scenes. Keep up the great work, Sister China. We want to thank Sister Jurita, yeah, who literally done a Piers Morgan today. Absolutely just bust up the scene and just drop 2 questions. I want to thank Lady Adele, who's going to be coming back onto the platform properly in the next few weeks. But we know the keynote speaker, the brother that tore the place down tonight. Brother Reverend, we've had you on the show several times, brother. And what you done tonight, brother, what you done tonight, my king, was absolutely illegal. It was illegal. When we had Reverend Shock on there, we had triple versions of Bernie Mac. Triple versions, brothers and sisters. He gave us Bernie Mac on a plate. On a plate, as he said in his own words, yeah, the Bernie Mac or the metaphysical teachings. You can't get no better than that, brothers and sisters. And so we're going to show. People are asking, was tonight recorded? Yes, it was recorded, and it should be out within the next 24 hours. Okay, brothers and sisters, I will send a full copy to Reverend Shock so he can put it on his own platform if he so wishes to. But
awesome.
We will also be putting this out tomorrow. So those of you on my mail out list and those of you that's on the WhatsApp groups, you will get tonight's breakdown, brothers and sisters. It was absolutely amazing.
Is it okay if I put my email in the chat?
Please do, brother. Jarita's always on that as well. Please do. Anytime you're ready, brother. Brothers and sisters, one of the things that Reverend said, one of the things that Reverend Shock stated, he said, literally, and this near at the beginning of his breakdown, brothers, do you understand that you and I carry the DNA of God?
Yep.
Understand that. When he said certain lines today that was just, I just couldn't. I was just blown. He said, we carry the DNA of God. Now, you remember, he said he's talking about science, not self-esteem, because obviously we could take that on an emotional level and feel good. But he said, I'm not here to boost your self-esteem. I'm here to teach you science. And this is backed up not just in his own studies. Scientists understand that this is standard information. We carry the DNA. Then you look at the mitochondrial cells of the female, they know that by studying the DNA of the black man and the black woman, you're looking at God and Goddess himself and herself. This is not personal. So a lot of the things that he may say may hurt and shock some of us. But brothers and sisters, take away the emotion. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us to rise above emotion into the thinking of God. And so sometimes, you know, we just got to let's clean that mind and come back and say, okay, you know what? Let me look at it with cold science, with cold facts. And that's what I really want to thank my brother for. And obviously tonight, what he's done is taken out the cobwebs out of our eyes, brothers and sisters. You know, when Jesus says in the Bible that literally you remove the spit, he spat into the man's eye, and so that man could see clearly. And understand this, brothers and sisters, right now we see through the colors of moods and emotion. But once you understand who you are and you start waking up to the truth, you start seeing the world through mathematics. So when you hear our brother speak, yeah, he's speaking a mathematical language. And that's why we've got to catch up and understand it's not emotion, it's mathematics now. Let's deal with the mathematics. And once you understand mathematics, what can you do? You can then solve problems. The reason why we're not solving problems because we're not understanding the mathematical way of teaching, the mathematical way of understanding, the mathematical way of researching. When you're listening to my big brother, Reverend Shock, you got to deal with mathematics of language, brothers and sisters. And that way we can understand the core of the science